What Yorubas call Balogun.
Yeah, Balogun is like the chief of war.
Is what
general.
Is what the Benis call a Dogun. Is what the Igbos call Odogun. It's the same thing. A war a war leader. It's as simple as that.
Okay, so this is a light bulb moment.
so look, these things.
This is a light bulb moment.
Probably he wasn't called maybe as a Chima when he was in Benin, but because as he was coming down towards this direction, there is a dominant group here that have formed an identity, what you call Igbo today. So he comes in with his members of his entourage. So they settled in Eka, part of Delta State, Agbo, Umunede.
Is that where they settled?
Settled along those parts. Settled in Eka, settled in Asaba, Uguashuku, Seluku, and crossed the River Niger, and settled in Indonesia. And continued. Settled in places like Obaro, continued to Oguta in Imo State, and continued to Ikwere in River State. But you see, this movement bring about fusion of cultures, languages, and identities, and create new ones from the existing ones. So this was that came from Benin, brought certain material culture that enriched what they met on ground, and also adopted from what was on ground, and they became one people. It was interesting to know that the man who led the Igbo nation during the early stages of Nigeria, Nnamdi Azikiwe, is of Benin Onitsha origin. And so that was why when he came to Lagos and settled and contested an election into the Western Region House of Assembly, and was going to be the premier Western Region from Ikeda constituency in Lagos, in modern day Lagos, but was denied because he was considered an Igbo man. Those who denied him didn't realize the fact that he is one of you whose ancestors left this part of the world to live in another part of the family compound, and his descendant has come back home. Because everywhere in Nigeria is home to all of us anyway. And so he should have been allowed the citizenship right of residency without limitation because of his ethnicity. Because those who considered him an Igbo man, they didn't know that being an Igbo is as much as being a Yoruba, and vice versa. Because of the interaction between the ancestors of the country people of Nigeria.
So what that means is this. I could be Yoruba today.
Yes.
And for geographical reasons, environmental reasons,
yes,
not necessarily political reasons, because politics is not going to come and say, you Yoruba and you Igbo, you are the same. We are not expecting politicians
to come and tell
us
to unite,
because they won't.
They won't, because it does not favor them.
It doesn't favor them. So it is accounts like this that we would use to really trace.
For people to now know that, look, Nigeria is like one large family compound. And all the constituent peoples are living in different parts of that compound. The same way you and I live in different parts of their family compounds individually. And so what this is supposed to do to us is, first, recognize this oneness enough to know now that when you hurt a fellow Nigerian, you're hurting yourself. You're hurting your own kith and kin. That his household today does not mean he's different from you.
And the fact that he doesn't speak your language is as a result of where he was born.
Simple. Languages shift, identity shift. If you give birth to a child today in Britain, and you don't speak Yoruba to that child, he will not hear, you won't speak Yoruba. Because not included in his DNA. You have to teach him Yoruba. You have to make effort to teach him Yoruba. Otherwise, you just pick up the language in his environment. That tells you that nobody was born with any language.
Okay, so now.
So the British came
and met people that have already mixed.
That is the point we always forget, because they learned from their own history of colonialism. Today, we are colonized by the Roman Empire. Much earlier than we were. And so I'm one of those who believe that colonialism came too late in Nigeria and left too early. Because colonialism is actually one of the ways that nation states were birthed. It's a reality of life. You may not like colonialism, but the side effect of it is that it creates nation states. And it's not left for the constituent peoples themselves to further the strength and the unity of such nation states as a reality. So Britain had the same history with Nigeria as at 43 AD when they were being conquered by the Roman Empire. We were splintered into tribes, but living in the same location, essentially the same people. Celtic people, Welsh, those who call English today. You know? But they didn't have a centralized authority. They didn't have a centralized rulership. They had, fragment of kingdoms here and there. And they didn't see themselves essentially as really, really the same because they were not aware of wider divisions. So they simply saw themselves as people in whatever form. And so that allowed the Roman Empire, that was a nation state of citizens. If you recall in the Bible, Apostle Paul was referred to as a citizen of Rome.
Yes.
Even though he's Jewish.
Yes.
Many people don't understand what that meant. It means that you could be Jewish by ethnicity or race and still be a member of the Roman nation. In the same sense today that you can be black and British, you can be Indian and British. It's citizenship.
Which led to a prime minister being a man of Indian descent.
Thank you. So that citizenship domestication in Rome, as at that time, strengthened Rome and made it the greatest empire in the world. Because it started from the strength of everybody to build a nation that was outward looking. So we are going about conquering other people. While other barbaric tribes, as the Romans would like to describe others, were splintered along tribal fault lines and warring amongst themselves. So it made it easy for Romans to go over and conquer. So British were in that state too, barbaric. They were not so united. They didn't understand the concept of nation
quote
states.
And unquote, just the way we are now. That's the way they were.
Then. So they came in here.
We are barbaric.
So they came in here. First, don't forget that what followed colonialism, what came before colonialism was slave trade. And slave trade, the Europeans didn't come into the interior to take anybody. They are the coast. It was Africans that were stealing Africans and selling to them.
Wait, okay, so now, this is a point where I want us to stress about.
Yes.
And I've listened to some people, again, people of my age, older people. They've said, you see, this account that you're giving was something that was an afterthought when the colonial masters realized that, look, if we put it out there in the stories that we are the ones that went into their territory and start picking their people, we will be seen as thieves, as wicked people, all types of, again, the word barbaric ways of qualifying us. So let us sell the story that we actually did not steal. It was them that was stealing their people for us.
No.
And we being businessmen, we couldn't say no.
No.
Okay, so what happened?
There was slavery in Africa before the white man came.
Oh, great.
The only thing is that when the white man came and the demand increased, it became something of an industrial scale. Because there was need for manpower to work in the new world that was just discovered by Europe, which is modern day American continent.
Europe.
American continent, not the south of America. So Britain had colonies there, France had, Spain had, Portugal, most of the European powers had territories in the New World. And so they needed workforce to actually cover the vast mineral and agricultural potentials of the entire America into wealth. And so they needed manpower because the native Indians were unwilling to work for the white man. They would rather die than work. And so they turned to Africa where they knew that these people actually had some form of slavery among themselves. Though in every tribe in Nigeria today, in every tongue, you have a native name for slavery. But you don't have a native name for same-sex marriage, for instance, because it's alien to Africa. So slavery wasn't alien to Africa, it was there. And so it was so convenient now to make extra money from it. And so the white man anchored on the coast, and Africa Bidubem went to the hinterland to import slaves and sold to them. So Africans must take full responsibility for transatlantic slave trade. It was perpetrated by Africans, with Africans as collaborators. And for me, the fact that the white man came here and you sold your own to him puts more responsibility on you for
that atrocity
than him, really.
Of course, because
he has nothing to lose. He's not of his own care.
He's sitting down there and you've come to the man to say, I got my brother and my sisters to sell, give you. In fact, I have some children of my neighbor too that I'll sell. And the man looks at his account like, okay, how much do you have? I have some money. Right, take. Whether it's cowries, whether it's naira.
And so, when the industrial era set in, beginning from 1807, there was no longer need for slaves because machines have been actually invented. So the British Empire, again, under some pressure from within, so because some people felt that slavery is inhumanity, it's massive humanity to man. And so the British Empire decided to enforce a ban on slavery and now switch to what we call legitimate trade.
Which was another form of slavery.
Well, colonialism rather. It's a matter of, okay, go and cultivate your land. We need some of these raw materials from your territory that will feed our industries. And so they brought in their companies here, Royal Niger Company and go. And they began to exploit, explore, and utilize what we have here. Now, before colonialism proper started, it was preceded by the age of exploration. So the British government and some other concerned stakeholders in that country, particularly merchants, even missionaries, sent in explorers to explore the entire length and breadth of Africa. And Britain was not alone in this. Most other European powers, Portugal, Spain, even France, Germany too, wanted to know what the interior of sub-Saharan Africa looked like and what was life like in there. So they sent in anthropologists, sociologists, adventurers generally. They came in. So for example, it was Mungo Park who came in and explored for them the nature and form of the river Niger. They had a faint idea that there was a river that runs through the interior of West Africa, but they had no clear idea of
how to navigate it.
Its source and its terminus. So, of course, Mungo Park came in here under the sponsorship of some groups in the UK, and which is I call them his servants, the Lander brothers, Richard and John Lander, they accompanied him. And so he was able to trace the source of River Niger from the Senegal region. Now, it was on his way to that determine its terminus, where it terminates, that he died in the Buxa Rapids, somewhere in Niger State here. So the exploration was continued by the Lander brothers, who now determined the fact that River Niger terminates into the Atlantic Ocean through the Niger Delta. So that made it possible for inland navigation of goods and services from Europe into the interior and outward export of raw materials too, through the same routes. Now, they did all of these explorations and took judicial notes. They also explored the anthropology and the sociology of the people. Enough for the British to now realize that, okay, there are three major cultural groups in this Niger area. Three. That's how they arrived at the three major groups. We didn't bestow on us their status as major groups, though. For example, they looked at the people that you now know as Yorubas of the Southwest, the legacy states of the Oyo Empire. They looked at their culture, their
practices,
everything, and decided that, look, from this part of the country to this part, these are Yorubas, essentially. And so they popularized that notion that, okay, these people are Yoruba. Even though before then, Yoruba didn't see himself as Yoruba. Rather, he saw himself as Ijesha, Ekiti, Ife, Ijebu, Oyo, individually, Ibadan,
Ilorin, Egba.
Never really saw himself as Yoruba.
So, Dr. Majid, let me bust your bubble. I was speaking with an older friend who is very, very intelligent, and he said something. Do you know there is a village called Aishegba Ekiti? I'll tell you what it means.
Okay.
They are from Ekiti, and they share a very close border with Egba. So people mistake them for Egba. Because of that, they name themselves Aishegba Ekiti, which means we are not Egba,
we are
of
Ekiti.
Okay.
Yes. So that was the state of what you call Yoruba land. It's not different from what you have in Igbo land. In fact, initially the word Igbo was derogatory.
Okay, this is news.
Yes. It was believed that Onisha people who came from this other part of the country used that to describe another person that were their neighbors in a derogatory manner. Meaning that the identity we now hold on to today was not something that any of us actually.
It wasn't a desired.
It wasn't desired. But politicians who should have taken this backward integration of our identities that the British did for us, but said, look, hey, all of you Ijebu Jeshas, yeah, Yorubas. But rather than the Nigerian political leadership that succeeded the British to have taken this identity forward to say, what do you think of it? Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa. I'm not one, we're actually the same too. To now have a forward integration now. And now create a nation of citizens that are socially cohesive and united. Leveraging on our common history, common heritage, commonalities in cultures, similarities in languages to say, look, we're essentially the same people. And bring about this consciousness they failed. They halted integration at that level for political reasons and weaponized it. And thus began the scourge of identity politics that has ridiculed democracy in every form in Nigeria today. And so the British knew that people are one people. They knew. They knew that, look, from Lagos in the southwest up until Kaba in Kogi, these people are Yoruba now. These people that look from Lokoja on the upper Niger up to Sokoto on this part and up to Borno are essentially Hausa speaking people. Language, so Hausa. And from where you now know as Igbo land, an entire old eastern region, which includes Cross River, Rivers, Akwa Ibom, are essentially Igbo speaking people. So that's why they came about that three broad categorization. And that's for the fact that actually, along the line, certain people began to ethnicize languages. And that was one of the greatest disservice that was done to this country. Ordinarily, if you look at the old eastern region, Igbo is commonly spoken across the entire region in a manner that nobody feels inferior speaking a language that may not have been their original tongue. In fact, among even the Igbos, those you call Igbos today, they have their different dialects that are not even mutually intelligible. They have languages of their own. So Igbo is just like that superficial language that everybody simply subscribes to. But some people started owning Igbo, owning Yoruba, and owning Hausa.
Like it is originally ours.
Ours. You are just
a borrower.
A borrower. So it created that dichotomy. So people started identifying more now along their own original language and ethnicities. Because they didn't feel welcome by those that claim to be the larger group. But this was failure on the part of those who claimed to be the larger group. It was a failure of leadership. It was a failure of citizenship, if you ask me. So this ethnicization of languages that transformed people from Yoruba speaking to now being a Yoruba man. From Igbo speaking to now an Igbo man. As if it's included in your DNA.
So it's not your language. That language or that identity, don't know because the language is part of the identity.
It's a language. You know, the implication of not de-ethnicizing languages is what I'm about to tell you now.
Okay.
If Yoruba was not ethnicized, and Igbo wasn't ethnicized,
or Hausa,
and Hausa wasn't partially ethnicized, I use partially because Hausa is still the most organic language in Nigeria because of the influence of Islam, which limited its assimilation of people, but also enhanced it along religious lines, and I'll come to that later.
Okay.
If language are not ethnicized in Nigeria, the same way English is not also racialized, the same way Arabic is no longer racialized.
It's not an international language.
French is no longer racialized. If Yoruba had remained just a language that is spoken in a particular region would spread, what that would mean is, if I was born in Lagos or Ibadan or Ife, and I grew up speaking Yoruba, I would have been accepted as part of Yoruba-speaking communities in Southwest, with my citizenship rights intact. So the question of go back to where you come from, you're not original Yoruba will not arise. Because there's a recognition that those of us that you met here also came from different parts of the world, but converged here and will now speak this common language that has borrowed from all over the world where we came from. The same thing with Igbo. If Igbo was not ethnicized at a point, that Yoruba man that was born, whose ancestors came from Ife, settled in Onisha, and was born in Onisha, and speaks Igbo, would have been treated just like any other part of the member of the society, with his full political and economic rights extended to him, without anybody even looking at you. But that is not the case today. So in Nigeria, it is becoming increasingly impossible to be Yoruba and Anambra, in the same sense that it's not possible to be Igbo and Lagos. And no nation can function well like this with this dichotomy. It's not possible. It's not.
That's true.
It's not possible.
Because and when I'm not supposed to go into this, but I'm just going to touch it. Can we say it is responsible for the unbalanced development that we have across board?
There is no development anywhere in Nigeria.
What?
This is the reality. No, there's no development. You asked again, what did the British do differently? They simply gave us a name because they recognize our similarity and oneness. So they just give us a name to usher us into the modern era of nation building.
But we decided not to move ahead with that train and just stay where we are. Like,
we decided to go backwards. Well, our ancestors are more civilized than us because they had a form of traditional citizenship that allowed these assimilations that took place in the past. Where somebody who lived Benin, come to Nisha and becomes an Igbo man, and is accepted. There's interchange of culture, no problem. The same thing with...
You can marry.
The same thing with Southwest, where a lot of people today that identify as Yoruba have origins in northern Nigeria. Some have origins in eastern and south Nigeria. You might ask me how.
How?
Let me use Lagos as an example. If you look at Lagos critically, Lagos is the Yoruba-speaking part of Nigeria.
True.
Today, it is incorporated into the southwest geopolitical zone.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at Lagos, at the composition of the aborigines of Lagos, let us do some historical adventurism.
All right, let's go.
So, it is said that the original inhabitants of Lagos are essentially the Awori people, and to some extent, to the Egun people of Badagry, who are indigenous to Badagry, that is not part of Lagos. The Egun people have cultural and linguistic affiliation with their counterparts in Benin Republic. Of course, Badagry is a border town between Nigeria and Benin Republic. The Aworis are a Yoruba subgroup who had their own unique identity and even language amongst the larger Yoruba stock.
True.
So they are considered as the most indigenous of the people of Lagos. So this was the status quo in Lagos until traders from neighboring Yoruba-speaking communities like Ijebu, Ijesha, Egba, Agado came into Lagos to trade and settled in different parts of what is now known as Lagos.
True.
With Yoruba language as a common denominator, because Lagos also falls under the cultural influence of Oyo Empire. Even though later the Benin Empire now came in to dislodge the influence of Oyo Empire and eventually birthed the Kingdom of Lagos by bringing people together and forcing a leadership on them. So, the Oba of Lagos is of Benin ancestry. Every Oba of Lagos you know, including the present Oba Akiolu Rilwan, is of Benin ancestry.
Okay, so big shout out to everybody from Lagos. You heard it here first.
Yes.
In case you don't know, in case you don't already know, Lagos has its ancestral journey from the old Benin Empire.
Yes. And now, to underscore the oneness of Nigerian, whether you are Benin, whether you come from within this space, the Benin people that came to Lagos and established that monarchy fused seamlessly into the Yoruba culture commonwealth. So you have a man whose name today is Akiolu. His predecessor was Adeyinka Oyekon. He's no longer Osazua or Obaze. They have become essentially part of that Yoruba-speaking community. They brought certain things, fused with it, and you have a unique Lagos culture that is Yoruba in nature.
Now, don't forget, this is also applicable to Ilorin.
And almost everywhere in Nigeria. Now, it didn't stop there. Now, you have people of Nupe origin that are Lagosians today. A classic example is the Oshoritapa family of Lagos. Oshoritapa was a Nupe general, war general, who was in the army of the Oba of Lagos, and of course distinguished himself as a man of valor, and eventually founded the Oshodi dynasty, or if you like, clan in Lagos today. They are of Nupe ancestry.
And the Oshodi, if I am not mistaken, the Oshodi family is one of the kingmakers. Prominent
kingmakers. In fact, at a time, one of them was the Olori Eyo of Lagos. They are that influential. They are that indigenous. They are that bona fide.
And if you trace it, they are from Nupe in Niger State.
Now, at a time too, when of course the British Empire abolished slave trade, a lot of people from this part of the world that were taken into the diaspora as slaves to Brazil and to Sierra Leone found their way back to Lagos, that was like the most developed city-states in this space before Nigeria was born. Because this was the only place that had this level of cosmopolitan nature. You already had British traders on the coast of Lagos, you had Portuguese, and so you had an evolving city-state that looked very plural enough for diasporans to come in and settle. Some of these diasporans were not entirely of Yoruba origin. Some were of Igbo origin. Some were of South, what you call South origin today. But they were attracted to Lagos, and they came in and became Yoruba speaking and fused in seamlessly. And today they identify as Yoruba without any reservation. And they didn't stop there. You know, during the last election, there was this talk and concern, legitimately so too, about the Muslim ticket or candidacy of Bola Tinubu and Kashim Shettima. And I remember making a joke to somebody. I said, look, the APC ticket is not just Muslim. In case you don't know, it is actually Northern. It is Borno, and it is Kanuri. And I was like, how? I said, okay, I'll tell you why. It might interest you to know too, that a long time ago, long before colonialism, long before 1914, a certain Muslim cleric from the Kanuri speaking part of Borno migrated all the way from Borno to Lagos, settled in Lagos, and married Madame Tinubu Efunroe, the prominent trader of Ijebu origin that dominated trade in Lagos. He married her, but she was not able to give him, a child of her own. So, it's strong women. So she permitted him to marry other wives and give birth. Because she was so prominent, there are women that are so prominent that the men begin to identify with their wives, rather than the other way around.
The other way around.
So this man said other children that all bore the name Tinubu, their mother's name, not their father's name. So the patriarch, the biological patriarch of the Tinubu family of Lagos, where our president come from, is actually a man of Borno, Kaduri, Showa heritage. This is a documented historical fact.
Wow.
That even the Tinubu family acknowledges. So you see that Lagos is like a mini Nigeria. So if our ancestors were this civilized enough, to assimilate and integrate peoples from diverse or plural parts of Nigeria, and they have become Yoruba speaking Lagosians today, why are we not taking this thing further?
Why are we retrogressing?
Is the wife of our president from Delta State as well, Mrs. Oluremi Tinubu.
Is she?
She is.